Christian Jackson. For those of you guys who are here for the first time on my Instagram, hey y'all. Looks like we are live here on Facebook and my YouTube channel. Hey you guys, my name is Christian Jackson and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. That is a lot of W's at the same time. So welcome to my channel. For those of you guys who are on the live, watching the replay, I appreciate you guys so much for your feedback and everything going on even after I'm live, right? Hey, Robert. And so I just want to say welcome to my channel. I'm new to YouTube. I just set this channel up a couple of weeks ago, so I wouldn't mind if you slid out real quick, hit up my YouTube, hit that subscription button and the bell so you can know when I have some new content coming your way. I'm working really hard about that. And so for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm a licensed therapist here in South Carolina, your licensed mental health and wellness professional, homegirl, and daddy issues expert. I'm really excited to bring to you guys some content based on my books. And so let me share them with you. Daddy Issues is a book that I wrote out of emotional trauma after dealing with a difficult relationship with my father that's actually still kind of going on today. So I dropped these girls here last July in 2020. And it's been a pleasure to watch everybody kind of give me great feedback and wonderful reviews and testimonials based on what you guys know is really good work here. So for those of you who don't know, this book is written for women by a woman. I literally was in therapy and needed to go and deal with some stuff with my dad, right, in our difficult relationship. And so out of therapy came this book because I had a lot of revelations about who I was, right? And so in the beginning, I'm painting the picture of what a woman with daddy issues looks like. Who is she? Is she the gold digger? Is she the one who is clingy? Is she promiscuous? And I've been all of these women based on a lot of my experiences with people. And so out of reading this book, you're going to see what it looks like to interact with people. And what those relational pieces are, right? So what are your attachment styles? What are daddy issues symptoms, right? I made it up out of a diagnosis based on the DSM-5, which is the book that we use to diagnose clients, us as therapists and counselors. And so it's a lot of attachment situations, a lot of relational issues, insecurity, trust, abandonment, rejection. We're looking at all those pieces. So once I really give you that definition, and each chapter, I'm laying out what daddy issue symptoms look like as a mother or as a cool auntie, as a spouse, as a friend. What kind of friend are you? Because yes, sis, your friendships and your relationships with anyone, is my whole point, are determined by your family of origin, right? And I'm looking at that piece when I'm diagnosing people, when we're doing assessments, and I'm getting to know people. In our very first session, I ask a lot of things about family. And so part of that is really understanding what it looks like when you are talking about your relationships with other people and what you learned from the very first people who took care of you, your village, right? So what was your relationship like with your father? What was it like with your mother? So one of the things I really want to make clear is that this book is just a piece of what issues we all have, right? We contend with a lot of different things, and daddy issues happen to be one of the things that kind of rang really loud for me. And so I'm talking about what it is that we are needing to kind of keep in mind when it comes to relational issues based on what we learn. We learn how to love, we learn how to hate, everything in between on that spectrum, how to have friendships and all those things. So this book is going to lay out for people what it really means to really kind of face the daddy issues. Everything from even being a daddy's girl, because I did have some women kind of tell me, yo, like, I don't really know or need to read this book because I have a good relationship with my father, which is great. But there are some elements and pieces here that I outline here in the book that are demonstrated by the stories that I tell, right? So I've met a lot of women over the years. We've done a lot of work, and I started to see a pattern. They started to really trigger me in the first place about my own daddy issues. And so I had to go back and say, hey, it's like I need to kind of package this stuff, put it together. So that's one piece that's really cool about it, is that it works, right? And so I'm really excited to share this with you and some other things I have along the way when it comes to the content that I have here for you, right? Created for you guys. I am also a trauma specialist. And what is trauma? We're going to get into it tonight, you guys. Yes, I definitely have some things for you here so we can talk about what daddy issues are. That is my brand, right? I'm your daddy issues expert. You can purchase my books at www.couchwithchristian.com. You can read the content. That's amazing, right? I'm always able to really kind of drop mental health nuggets and link them back to daddy issues, which is kind of one of my skill sets. And I look at that through the eyes of trauma, right? So a lot of my professional experience has been, yes, sis, like This is what your trauma response looks like when you're in certain situations. These are PTSD symptoms, right? So today, I really want to get into an interesting topic because it's really going to be important for us to look at what our triggers are and how they do kind of elicit trauma responses. So, as a trauma specialist, I'm an EMDR trained therapist, which means that I use this really cool modality when we're talking about bilateral stimulation and you follow my fingertips with your eyes and we're really trying to safely elicit traumatic memories, right? So that we can get into a good place to really process and unlearn those things that have been stuck with us since the beginning of our formative years, right? A lot of those messages and scripts going back to how we relate to other people, what relationships look like, right? And so I was having a conversation earlier with someone about whether or not like silence is a trigger, right? Literally like no noise, right? So my husband actually pointed this out to me on our very first date. He told me that he noticed that I was singing all the songs in Applebee's, which is where he took me because I was nervous and he could tell, but he was really sweet at the time. This was 15 years ago, and he was like I'm not going to call you out now, but literally at a wedding that I actually wore this really cute headdress to a couple weeks ago. You may recognize it because you may follow me. I was singing all the songs because I like music, but then also we're sitting at the table with some of our friends, and I also don't like. I'm a small talker, and some people don't like small talk, but that's okay. And it is because I really had to come to grips with the fact that silence is uncomfortable for me. So I had to lean into that thing, right? So it's funny how people around you notice things about you that you don't see. So objectively speaking, they can say, hey, like you are tripping. Like, why is it that you have to make this noise every time you're met with this stimuli, right? So I do want to back up and talk about what a traumatic response is, right? Our bodies remember when we go through certain things, right? So there's a really great book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And I highly recommend the book because what it does is really outline in layman's terms what it means to really tune into what your body does when you're responding to a stimuli. For example, if you are bitten by a dog and you never resolved that issue and kind of got over that fear, then your body's going to remember that really painful experience you had, and it, as in your body, is going to respond before you do cognitively, right? It's a really interesting thing. So our brain is set up such that it is to keep us alive, right? Like it's got survival techniques out the wazoo, right? It's there to literally say, yo, Chris, you remember that time you was at Sally's house and the little puppy bit you in your leg? Next time you see something furry, you run the other way, right? You put your walls up. Next time you see a man who wears this color shirt or talks to you this certain way, you understand you can't trust people like that, right? So it applies in different situations. So we have to know what our bodies do in certain situations, right? Silence is one of those sneaky triggers, right? So I have to lean into what my body is doing, what my mind is telling me, because what trauma does is impact of mind, body, and soul. And we really have to look at what those details are because that is going to be the first step in really managing your trauma triggers. So the question again tonight is, can the discomfort with silence be a trauma response? And the answer, the spoiler alert, is yes, it is a trauma response. And I'm going to speak specifically for me. I'm uncomfortable with it. It's weird. And I haven't really figured out what it is. And I say weird because that is the word I insert when I don't know what's going on. Okay, so that's not a judgment call on anybody saying whether something is good or not so good, making a judgment. It's just like I have to lean into that, really kind of figure out what that is, right? So is it uncomfortable for you to be in a space where nobody's making any noise when you're alone? What does that really mean? And one way that you can actually tap into what that silence is saying to you, what that discomfort is asking yourself what your self-talk is. So can discomfort with silence be a trauma response? Yes. And one of the things is to ask yourself what it means to you. So let's talk about self-talk. When I am with my clients, I teach them young and old, the ABC model. A is the activating event. Something happens. It's a trigger, right? Then we have a dialogue with ourselves. And it's really coming from core beliefs that are literally operating all the different automatic negative thoughts or ants that we have, right? So if I believe I'm not good enough at my core, first of all, I'm asking you, who taught you that, right? Is that coming from your village? Is that something that is really a proponent of or a component of your daddy issues, right? Is that the message that you got from your daddy maybe not being there, or the interaction you had with them? He may not have said you weren't good enough, but maybe he showed you that because he said, hey, I'm not showing up when I said I was, or he just doesn't show up and you're waiting by the window. What does that look like, right? So what does silence mean? So for people who are really acknowledging and leaning into their daddy issues and saying, hey, yeah, I do have daddy issues. I have insecurity issues. I have self-worth things going on. Silence for me meant daddy wasn't showing up or answering my text messages or answering my phone calls or coming to get me. That is silence for me. So it's been reinforced over the years when you're in your formative years and when you're learning who you are and really in those developmental stages when you're really trying to grasp your identity. Silence to you, suddenly you're learning silence is equated with something is wrong. Possibly even something is wrong with me. So what's that self-talk, right? So when you're met with silence, no matter where it is, you could be in a comfortable space with some friends and it's silent, like I was at a table at a wedding a couple of weeks ago. Silence means something is wrong, right? That could be the narrative for some people. And so it's uncomfortable because, just as an example, my daddy taught me something is wrong when I hit you with radio silence. I'm not speaking to you, right? So what else is it that can come to mind when we're talking about our self-talk if we're just uncomfortable with silence? Can discomfort with silence be a trigger? Yes. We're looking into our self-talk. What is it that we're telling ourselves in the silence, right? Some people are so uncomfortable with silence because you have to be met with something, and that is yourself. So do I like myself? Do I get along with myself? What is my relationship with she, her, they, right? And so in silence, when no one else is around to distract you from things, then it's so interesting what we come up with in our head, right? And so self-talk with our silence means something is coming, like an impending doom. Have you ever had that feeling where you're like, okay, the other shoe is literally going to drop and this sucks. I don't like the way this feels. And so silence to you could mean, okay, now my head is ruminating, right? What is going on? Something is coming. Or it could be that I am just not enough just being in this space. That can be so scary for people. That is a self-worth issue. Who was it or what was it that taught you that just being you here on this elevator, here at this call, here on this at this table at this wedding, why is it that you just can't be enough just to be in that space, right? And who taught you that? Where is that narrative coming from? So there are so many different pieces that I think are really important when it comes to managing the anxiety that comes with silence. For me, I still have some work to do with that. For me, it's kind of like I feel like I may have to perform, right? Like I'm the funny guy. I'm the one that likes to crack the jokes, sing the songs, dance, make the moves, have a good time. And that's a conversation I was having a little bit earlier, that level of responsibility that we have with for other people, right? So in the silence, if I feel like I have to perform, I'm the one that needs to be fulfilling my role of making sure everybody is okay, then that's a lot of pressure on me. And so if I'm always used to performing in crowds, whether it's my friends or whatever it is, and the silence somehow means I'm not doing my job, like I'm not good enough, right? And so that is a trauma response. If we're automatically taught, like, in silence, it means I'm in trouble. So now I'm asking you, if you're one-on-one with me in therapy, what did it mean when you were in trouble? Does silence equal I'm in trouble? Again, going back to silence means something is wrong, right? If it means I'm in trouble, what did it mean for you to be in trouble? What happened when you were a kid, right? So I had a conversation one time with a client who had kind of let me tap into her self-talk about something, and she's like a people pleaser. Silence to her means that you're not fulfilling your role. Same thing, right? Like you're not doing what you're meant to do. I can't depend on you. So if they're silent, then I must be, and something has to be going on. I have to be doing something, right? And so for this person, she said, if I don't give people what they want, then I don't want anybody to be mad at me. That's why I give it to them. So people are going to be mad at me if I don't give them what they want. Can you hear how elementary that sounds? And that is no shade to anybody. But if you just think about the way that you speak to yourself when you respond to something, it's really important for you to understand that silence is one of those sneaky triggers when it comes to trauma responses. What are your stimuli? What is that self-talk? So we're not going to be afraid of what our self-talk looks like or what it is, right? We're leaning into the things we're telling ourselves. So for this particular person, if her go-to response is, I'm going to be in trouble if I don't give this person what they want, right? I'm a people pleaser. So silence to me means, okay, wait, I have to be doing something. I'm a performer. I have to do something. Then think about the developmental stage, right? So we kind of tracked it back to her being about 9 years old, right? And so when she was about 9 years old, she was the parentified child. And in layman's terms, that means y'all ever been like the auntie that had to take care of your cousins, or the big sister that because mom was out working 12, 14 hours, you had to take care of everyone. I'm in trouble if I don't do this thing right. It's a lot of pressure and expectation on someone, right? So if you're met with silence, what does that actually mean? So we're talking about here the subtle triggers that are coming into your life that you may not even realize, and they're playing in the background. When it comes to trauma, our bodies, again, are going to remember what it felt like when we went through that traumatic experience, whether it's grief. What does silence mean, right? Maybe it was like you didn't have closure with someone. And that silence, the fact that you didn't have the conversation you wanted when you lost a friend, whether they passed away or that relationship just ended, what did that silence mean? And what is reinforcing that message that you have in your head? So part of what we're doing in trauma work with me is going back to the beginning and asking yourselves, what are those root core beliefs, right? And that's something that I learned in my training as a trauma therapist. What is it that is really kind of attracting you to this pattern that you have, right? So I like to think of it as a tree, right? What are the roots? Those core beliefs, a lot of the times, especially with women with daddy issues, is I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, right? So a lot of those self-worth issues, my voice doesn't matter type of thing, especially for people who are survivors of trauma, because if you're directly impacted by a traumatic event, whether it be some kind of abuse, spiritually, emotionally, physically, sexually, then you have been violated in some way where your voice didn't matter. So that's really what a lot of women would carry when it comes to certain directly being victims of trauma, emotional trauma, including daddy issues. If you really believe that you are not good enough and your voice doesn't matter, then it's to the point where you're not even going to have any kind of really automatic space in your head to know exactly what's going on. Like you're just going to automatically feel down, right? What is your body doing in those responses? Is your stomach dropping? Is your heart palpitating? What does that look like? In silence, if you sit mindfully, right? Like for me, breathing and doing mindfulness and grounding breathing activities is really tough because for me, silence is it's loud, right? Like we're talking about our self-talk. We're talking about how my brain just goes all over the place, right? Silence is loud for me. And I think as I'm saying that out loud with y'all here live, that is probably a rabbit hole I need to go ahead and go down, right? Because I'm always doing my own work too. So if we're going to just kind of recap what this means, triggers are subtle and they are many, right? But they come from a message, a script that we adopted from the people who raised us, our village, our grandmas, our aunties, our friends, whoever they may be. If we're talking about in the context of daddy issues, there are a lot of messages, whether your father was there or not there, again, on that spectrum, we're looking at what messages you picked up. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person sat you down and said, you know what, Christian, this is how you do life. We watch people's moods, right? I was having a conversation about this earlier. We watch and see how people reinforce or back up what they say, right? That's really important. And so my kids watch me, right? My nieces and nephews, they watch me. They watch you. So what is it that you were even passing down? Which is why in my book, I do have that chapter about daddy issues and motherhood. Again, whether you're the cool auntie, you're the mentor, you're the leader who someone looks up to, whatever it may be, what is it that people are watching below you come up with, right? So when you're met with silence, and tonight that just happens to be one sneaky trigger I really wanted to process with you guys because it's something that came up in session earlier today, that I am responsible narrative. What do you feel responsible for? What does silence equate for you? What is that self-talk piece? And so that's something that's really going to be helpful for you to do in some therapeutic work, right? So whether you meet someone in therapy and you're doing the one-on-one work or you're doing a group, it's really kind of tough to really dig into what these subtle triggers are because you may not know what they are. Another big tricky piece about trauma is that it has us on autopilot, right? That survival mode to where it becomes so normal we don't even know that we're doing it, right? That it being responding to these stimuli. So give yourself grace in that and be and hold space for yourself and have a trusted friend or someone that can refer you to someone who is professionally trained to help you work all these things out, right? One of the things that I'm really excited about is working with women in my Daddy Issues Healing Circle, right? So that is something, the applications opened last week. With the launch of my website, they will be open until April 23rd, 2021. I'm really excited about that because I finally get to lead a live group with specialized curriculum based on my book, right? I signed someone up today and I'm really, really excited about it. It's official. So we're up and rolling with a welcome package, and she's getting her information so she can go ahead and get into the separate Facebook group that would be directly for this inaugural cohort of women who are going to get together and work through their daddy issues with me, the author and licensed professional of daddy issues, how to detangle from the sins of our fathers. I'm really excited for this group because this 8-week journey, healing journey, is already something I know works, right? So for 8 weeks, we're meeting faithfully and we're walking through, like I said, the specialized curriculum, the sister of daddy issues, how to detangle from the sins of our fathers. And we're going to work this stuff together. One really important piece about group work, working through trauma, is that you share space. You hold space for one another. And so it's really going to be important for you to be in a space to be vulnerable. It's not required, or I'm not going to force that on anyone because it's a really tough thing. It's a really great way, group is, to slide into a therapeutic space, right? So if you've never been in therapy before, a group can be pretty intimidating for some people. But even then, you're not the only one there. Right? So the Me Too movement was so powerful because so many people were released from their shame and the weight was lifted on some of their stories, right? A lot of them were consistently saying this thing: shame cannot live in community. That is one thing that Brene Brown tells us, right? So the Daddy Issues Healing Circle is giving people a chance to do just that and say things they may not be able to be saying even with their best friend, because you have women with like-minded goals and an aim all in one place. And I'm really excited. So if you all are interested, you know someone who's interested, you can share this video. You can send them to me directly. You can go to my website at www.couchwithchristian.com. Apply for the Daddy Issues Healing Circle because I'm doing screenings to make sure people are safe enough to be in group, because that is going to be a really huge piece of the efficacy, right? And what I'm going to do is embrace silence, right? So tonight we have talked about how silence is one of those sneaky triggers that we may not think when it comes to kind of firing off our trauma responses, making us feel uncomfortable with stuff, right? And so what we're going to do in group is embrace the silence. That's what I'm going to do. So if there's a time for me to do that, that would be now, is to go ahead and get comfortable enough with it. Remember the power in silence, right? Because sometimes we need that space to process things, right? Especially in a group. So I want to let the wheels turn. And so I'm excited to engage with you guys. Please, please, please send me a DM like you always do anyway, and I'll answer your questions privately. I'm engaging with you in the comments. So I'm excited to offer this group to you guys, offering my books to you all. If you have any questions, please hit me up. And we are going to wrap up this Wellness Wednesday. Thank you guys for tuning in and for watching the replay. I'm excited to engage with you guys. You have a wonderful evening. Bye, you guys.